Today's video is focused on two main concepts: how to find the percent of a number and how to find the whole when given the part in the percent. There are three main ways on how to find the percent of a number. One is to use mental math, because 10% of 70 is 7. I can multiply 7 times 3 because 30% is 3 times 10 to get 21. That would be the correct answer. Another way is to change the 30% into a decimal, 0.3 or 0.30, and multiply that by 70. 0.3 times 70, also 21. The third way is to change that 30% into a fraction. You could do 30 over 100, or use the fraction in lowest terms, 3/10 times 70 over 1. Notice that I'm going to use my cross-canceling method that was taught earlier this year, and multiply and also get 21. So either you could use mental math, you could change to a decimal to multiply, or change to a fraction and multiply. The key here is that of tells you that you've got to multiply to find out the percent of a number. Now, when you want to find the whole when given the part, even though the word of is there, it doesn't mean percent of a number, meaning 40% times, because this number we don't know. We can't multiply what we don't know. Instead, we'll divide to figure out that number. So if we do 12 divided by 40%, that will work. But just like in the previous example, that 40% would need to be changed to either a fraction or a decimal. I prefer to change to a fraction in this scenario. So 12 over 1 divided by 4/10, which is the same as 40%. As you know, the normal procedure for dividing fractions is to change to, first off, this should be 2/5, the simplest form, is to change to the reciprocal and then to multiply. We'll cross cancel, and 6 times 5 is 30. So 30 over 1 is your answer. So 40% of 30 is 12. Easy way to check that, again, the mental math. If we think that answer is 30, 10% of 30 is 3, 4 times that is 12, so we know that answer is correct. Now, that was just a quick overview, and it would be ideal for someone just reviewing. Let me go over everything step by step. First off, mental math is great for calculating percents. 10% of any number is the same as dividing by 10. So you can see that simple pattern by looking at these examples. 10% of 800 is 80. 10% of 140 is 14. 10% of 1,500 is 150. And 10% of 65 is 6.5. You'll note that in each situation, all you did was move the decimal over to the left one place to get that new number. And so that process would be easy to follow, is that to find 10% of a number, you just move the decimal over one place. To find 1% of a number, you would move the decimal over two places. And that would give you the same thing. But look at this relationship between 10% and 20% of a number. As I said before, you move that decimal over one place to find out what 10% of a number is. But because 10 and 20 is clearly double 10, 60 times 2 would be 120. So the relationship between 10 and 20 is a ratio. It's twice as much. So once you know 10%, you can figure out 20% by doubling. The same thing would work here. If 10% is 35, 20% is 70, and 30%, since 10 times 3 is 30, 35 times 3 is 105. 30% of 350 would be 105. So you can use that mental math, especially if your percent ends in a 0, to find a percent of a number. So to find 40% of 50, since 10% of 50 is 5, you would multiply 5 times 4, because 10 times 4 is 40. You'd multiply 5 times 4 to get your answer of 20. So 40% of 50 is 20. Okay? Now, the other methods we talked about is to find the percent of a number, you can change the percent to a fraction or decimal and multiply. So this same exact problem could be solved two different ways. 25% of 88 could be changed to 1/4 times 88 over 1. You can see the cross-canceling I did. 1 times 22 is 22. 1 times 1 is 1. The correct answer would be 22. That same answer could be solved by changing that 25% to 0.25. And 0.25 times 88 also equals 22. Let's take a look at this problem solved as a fraction. So 25% of 40, since 25% as a fraction is 1/4, you could solve this. We'll cross cancel this. 1 times 10 is 10. 1 times 1 is 1. The correct answer is 10. 25% of 40 is 10. Here's another example, and again, we can use mental math here because 10% of 20 is 2. 10% of 20 is 2. This is 90%. It's 9 times as big. So since 10% of 20 is 2, you just multiply that by 9 to get 90% of 20 is 18. This situation here, 75%, as we talked about in class the other day about very common percents, most people know that 75% is 3/4. So that's an easy one to multiply. 3/4 times 32 over 1. We're going to cross cancel our 32 and our 4. Change it to 8 and 1. 3 times 8 is 24. And so 75% of 32 is 24. This is another one. It's a special multiplier because it ends in 0. So this is a convenient one to use mental math. So since 10% of 50 equals 5, 30% would equal 15. Now, 12% times 85, this one's not convenient to change to a fraction because your denominator of 100, then simplifying is not a super easy number to work with. So my suggestion for this one would be to change to a decimal. 0.12 times 85. Doesn't matter where you put the 85 on the top or the bottom. Just got to show you work properly. 2 times 5 is 10. Carry the 1. 2 times 8 is 16. Plus the 1 is 17. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 8 is 8. Bring down everything. Now, obviously there's 2 decimal places in this factor, so there's 2 in your product. 12% of 85 is 10.2. So you'll notice in this example, my answer didn't come out to a whole number. Be aware that that is the case in a lot of examples. 25% of 48, another special fraction or percent that you know the fraction is 1/4. So 1/4 times 48. Again, we're going to simplify on the diagonal, and we get an answer of 12. So 25% of 48 is 12. Now, the other concept in here is to try to find the whole. If you know the part in the percent, you can find the whole by dividing. So just like you know that 1/5 times 60 is 12, 12 divided by 1/5 equals 60. And it's this concept that we use to solve this. So to find 30% of what number equals 15, we're going to take the part, and we're going to divide it by the 30%. Now, of course, just like before, that 30%, we're going to write as either a fraction or a decimal. I prefer in this format to use the fraction, so I'm going to change the 30% to 3/10. So my question is now 15 over 1 divided by 3/10, which of course, following standard division of fraction rules, I'm going to remember to reciprocal the right fraction and multiply. So I'm going to rewrite this as 15 over 1 times 10 over 3. Then I'm going to go ahead and cancel out my 3 and my 15. And 5 times 10 is 50. 1 times 1 is 1. My correct answer here is 50. And if you want to double check, 30% of 50 is 15. I know that because of my my mental math. 10% of 50 is 5. 30% will be 15. So I know that that answer is a correct answer. Another example here, 20% of what number is 18? Again, here's my part. And I'm going to divide it by my 20%. Now, 20% is 20 over 100. That can be simplified to 1/5. So 18 over 1 divided by 1/5 becomes 18 over 1 times 5 over 1. 18 times 5 is 90. And my answer here is 90. And again, I can do mental math. 10% of 90 will be 9. 20% will be 18. So I know that I did this right. Another one here, and again, we've got a percent that we should be familiar with. So we're going to do 27 divided by 3/4. And again, we're going to set it up as 27 over 1 times the reciprocal. And again, we can cross cancel. So you're going to find many of these skills that we've learned earlier are really going to come in handy to solve this. And the answer we get is 36. And again, we want to double check that. Yes, 75% of 36 is 27. That's a reasonable answer. I have a couple word problems to end this. So if 45% of 186th graders signed up for a club, how many students signed up? So we're going to use our technique, which is to find 45% of 180. And in this case, I'm going to use my decimal version, 0.45 times 180. So 180 times 0.45 to find out how many students signed up. 5 times 0 is 0. 5 times 8 is 40. Carry the 4. 5 times 1 is 5. Plus 4 is 9. 4 times 0 is 0. 4 times 8 is 32. Carry the 3. 4 times 1 is 4. Plus 3 is 7. And as we bring this down, we have 8100. Our two decimal places tell us 81. So 81 students signed up. That makes sense because half of 180 would be 90 students. So it makes sense that it would be a little bit less than 90 at 45%. Another scenario, another word problem here. 125 7th and 8th graders signed up for our club. This represented 20% of all 7th and 8th graders. How many 7th and 8th graders attend this school? So that wants to tell us, basically we know 125 is 20% of how many? So we want to basically find the part, which is 125, and divide it by 20%. And we change that 20% to its fraction, 20 over 100, which simplifies to 1/5. So we're going to change that into a multiplication problem, 125 over 1 times 5 over 1. We multiply that out, and 5 times 125 is 625 over 1. So there are 625 7th and 8th graders that attend the school. You guys did a great job sticking around for this long video. Thanks a lot, and good luck on your homework.